Alright, so I already did a spoiler free review, so if you haven't checked that out yet, I'll put a link in the description. But as far as this movie goes for Fantastic Four, it's not the greatest version that it could be, of course. Um, like going straight into it, I think the time skip is one of the biggest issues I have with this movie. And I mentioned that a lot in my spoiler free review. Like, they do the time skip, and it's a full year and yet they're just training and stuff. It's like they've been training for a year. They've been looking for Reed because he takes off, and it's like, all right, I understand that's what they're doing. That's why Ben is working for them because he's doing stuff for them, so they're making it a priority to actually look for Reed and try to find him a cure and everything like that. And I was like, okay, I get that. I understand that. He takes off, and then poof, it's a year later. I was like, okay, excuse me, that really shocked me. I didn't think they were going to skip a full year. I thought he would try to take off. I thought, honestly, he'd get busted and they bring him back and then they try to figure out, what the heck do we do? But he runs off into the wilderness. Boom, 1 year later. And it's just like, alright, Johnny's still practicing. Ben is doing some awesome stuff, which we see for like a minute of the movie. That scene where he's like in the forest beating people up. The whole movie probably could have been about his missions. And even though that would suck as a Fantastic Four movie, it would have probably been way cooler than this current movie, to be totally honest, because it would at least be really actiony. Plus, it would have the serious drama of Ben doing these crazy missions. But he has like this amazing power, but based on how he looks, he hates that power and he wants to get rid of it. But he can't do that unless he goes to these missions, because that's the only way that they'll really make his condition a priority to fix. So that could have been great. Instead, we have a buttload of talking, and just going through is like, all right, so we have introductions for the characters and stuff like that. We have Reed, we have Ben, the little kids. Then they have the science fair thing, which was them, I guess, as teenagers. That was a really weird science fair. I was so confused during that scene because I thought they were gonna make the joke like this is for little kids because there was a little kid next to him. So I guess it was just a public science fair, which I guess they do. I've never been in one, but I was like, it seemed like everyone around him was younger than he was, and that was what kind of threw me off. It didn't seem like anyone was even remotely close to their age. But they have the scene. He gets hired in, and it was okay. Like I was going through it, I was like, all right, not there's still the introduction, and I was fine with it. They go through, they're working on their stuff. We meet Doom, who's like listening to classical music and playing Assassin's Creed 2, which is probably one of the best scenes in the movie because Assassin's Creed 2 was in it. Um, and it's like, okay, he's an absolute dick. He likes whatever, I can't, Sue. He likes Sue. And they work together. He's still a dick. He's jealous of Reed because he's talking to Sue and all this crap. Finish everything. They go to the planet. They get mad, and they had some cool concepts in there that I enjoyed. It was like they do this whole thing. It's like we're gonna get to go to this planet, and then they don't get to go. It's like, yeah, we're gonna send experts there, and really the scene where they were drinking, I like that scene. And Doom is talking about, do you know who landed on the moon, but who built the shuttles and stuff like that. I was like, that's actually very cool. Like, that was really good dialogue. They had stuff like that throughout the movie, and then they finally go, and it's like, all right. I didn't realize that was, I'm pretty sure, like half the movie, or it was at least like 40 minutes or something into the movie. They finally went and got their powers. I didn't even realize that when I was watching. And so they get their powers, we get the time skip, and it's just more boring. It's just like nothing is happening. I keep thinking something big's about to come, and there's nothing. And just going through it, that was the whole problem. And I mentioned this before. Whole movie was like a bait and switch. Every time you think something really cool is about to happen, it's like, nope, it's just another kind of cool thing. Here's a joke. Here's something that seems like it should lead to something really epic. And then, even when it finally leads to something that should be really cool, like the first fight scene that's an hour into the movie, it's a minute long fight scene. Reed punches like 6 guys, and then Ben knocks him out with a headbutt, which I don't think should have worked anyway, because he stretches. Like, it would be like headbutting a basketball. It would just bounce away. Like, it's not gonna be destroyed. Like, his head, he shouldn't have been knocked out, but I guess he wasn't prepared. That was how I went with it, because he does have to make that happen with his body. But I don't know. I guess that was how it went because he had control over his face clearly, which was another thing. And I mentioned a whole freaking year, and they still don't have complete control over their powers. I mean, with Johnny, there wasn't much to it. It was him just trying to fly faster. So I guess that makes sense because it's like he just have to keep pushing himself. But like learning brand new abilities or learning simple stuff for Reed, like stretching his arms and being able to control that, I thought was really dumb that it took. I mean, I know he's trying to spend like his whole year, he's trying to do this and do that, but he clearly spent the time to like build a car or steal a car or do something. Somehow he got that classic car, and I'm sure he had to fix it up. He didn't think I should probably use some of this time to just figuring out how to stretch and bring my body back to me in case, I don't know, maybe these freaking things break, these springs snap off of me, and then that's it. Which he clearly had control of before because he was running out just in the wilds. But when the thing broke at the end of the movie, it was like, oh, I can't control this. I'm like, he clearly had full control of that when he was running. But I don't know. I guess it's back and forth hormones. So them still training on their powers, I thought was really dumb. After the time skip, like at first I was like, that's a cool concept. They have to learn their powers, but when it got to the end of the movie, I'm like, it's kind of annoying that they have to learn their powers after a freaking year of literally only being in the thing. Like, Sue didn't go on missions. Johnny didn't go on missions. Reed was doing whatever he was doing, hiding and running and stuff. I know he had a lot more to do, but Sue should have been, like, perfect with her powers at that point. She should have been able to fly, shouldn't have been anything. And Reed should have at least been able to control his arms. Like, him being knocked out of the suit at the end shouldn't have been a detriment to him after a full year. But like, that's just serious. There's no reason you have a full year with this, and you have this thing like, of course, if it broke on one arm, he could fix it with the other. But that's just not something that I felt should have happened in the movie. Like, if they were gonna do that, maybe don't do the time skip, or maybe do. It's been like a month or 2 months. That I could understand. Maybe even 3 or 4 months. I can understand they don't have like complete control over all of their abilities, and it would be like, all right, I can understand that they're, like even with Johnny, like they do it where basically his suit is the only reason he's not on fire, stuff like that, and it's like, okay, that I can understand, like him not being able to completely control that flame. I get that, but after a year, I feel like he should be able to at least have some control over that, or they mention like, look, I can at least get like this part of my body under complete control without this suit. And instead, they're still just training and they don't have their powers, completely intact. And it's like, what are they? All they've been doing is training and doing experiments on them for a full year, and yet they still have to practice like floating. All she has to do, she makes herself invisible. She makes other stuff invisible. The only other power she has is the force field, which is how she flies. So it's like, how is that not just a part of the early training? At least after making other stuff invisible, which I thought that was the cool scene too, when they showed her turn the cargo thing completely invisible. I was like, that's really sweet, because I don't think they had that. They kind of had it a little bit in the other Fantastic Four, but in this one they made it seem like she could just turn stuff invisible, and it was just like, poof, it's gone, and that's how it seemed. But that really annoyed me after the time skip that they still did have control over their powers. It annoyed me, of course, like I mentioned, all the talking and just going through and nothing really happening, which, excuse me, is why I had such a huge comparison to Batman v Superman, because it was the same thing, and that was just longer, and that's literally the only reason I'd rather see this, because it's a shorter movie compared to Batman v Superman, which I at least enjoyed the fight scenes. Like, I think there is a solid, I want to say there's at least 30 full minutes of fighting in Batman v Superman, and in this it's like 20 full minutes, if it's even 20 full minutes of fighting. And I guess you kind of have to count, it's probably 20 minutes, because you have to count the scene with Doom when he first wakes up and he's like killing people, which, mentioned in my spoiler-free review, that was actually my favorite part of the entire movie. It wasn't him fighting against the Fantastic Four, it wasn't them learning their powers, it wasn't any of that crap. It was just Doom killing a bunch of random people because he was so powerful. Like, he melts all the people inside their suits and like burns them alive and stuff, and then he's just walking down the hall, which reminded me of a couple of different anime, and he's people's brains are just exploding, and he's just walking past them. It's just like boom, their heads are popping and blood splattering on the wall. I'm like, this is actually really awesome. Like this right here is kind of what the movie should be. It's like it's tense because they have a crazy super villain who's really powerful, and that was part of the reason the fight scene was actually pretty good because he was overpowering them. He had so much more power than all of them separately, so they did have to team up to beat him, like they do in the comic books. And it did kind of work. That was really the only thing that was so reminiscent of the comics is like they have to team up to beat Doctor Doom because his powers are just so out there compared to them having kind of in a sense elemental abilities. So it was just like okay, it's kind of cool. The walking down the hall thing was super freaking sweet. So I love that scene. So apparently Doom is my favorite, I guess, because he plays Assassin's Creed and made me think of anime. So games and anime, favorite parts of the whole movie. But just going through it, it was like, man, I I just kind of keep thinking about like, what if this was a TV show? Like, I think it could make it because we go through the whole thing. First hour, like I say, that's when the fight shows up. So they have the first hour talking introductions, and I may have watched the cinema sins on this before I saw the movie. I believe I did, and I just forgot I saw it because I remember I watched something and it was like, why didn't they just start the movie at the science fair instead of doing the thing where they're little kids and stuff? Which makes a lot of sense because when they did the thing as kids, I thought they were gonna get to the planet and they would find like the car. Because that's why you show stuff like that. It's like, oh, they did this little thing 15 years ago or something like that, and then it's like, man, we finally made it to the planet. Oh, look at this on the ground. It's that car that we sent back like over a decade ago. That's why you have scenes like that in movies, even though it's insanely coincidental because it's an entire planet, and it's like, oh, we just happened to land where the car is. That's the only reason you do that. And they didn't even do that. They didn't even bother showing that stuff. So they really did need to show, their young lives as kids, and their parents, or like Reed's parents didn't really. His dad, at least, was mad that he was doing experiments. Ben's older brother was beating up on him, and that's where we're getting clobbering time and stuff. It was like, well, we definitely didn't really need to see that because it doesn't come up at all later in the film. Like the only reason that comes up is because when they're still kids, that's how they meet each other. Because Reed actually ends up going to the junkyard, which is where Ben's family works, which we didn't need because none of that does anything. They don't, like I said, they don't even do the recall to the little car being transformed or transported in the beginning of the movie. So there really was no reason for that first chunk. Like we see them as kids, like sure that's how they met and stuff. So I get that that's why they did it, but it really was kind of a waste because they could have done it, because they kind of had it early on where it's like, and I wanted to mention this. I forgot I didn't do it in my spoiler-free review, but the kids, like when Reed was like, I want to be the first person to like teleport to another planet or something. And all the kids in the class laughed. I was thinking, like, aren't they all like 8 years old or something crazy like that? Like, how insanely impossible is that to like an entire class of like 8-year-old kids? They're all laughing like, that's so stupid. Like, that's the stupidest thing he could have ever said in life. Is like being like basically. I mean, I know the way he said it was like, I just want to teleport here and stuff, but just being a scientist, like they had to be like 8 years old. They weren't teenagers for sure. They were young kids, and I'm like, all these kids are just laughing like crazy, like that's totally impossible and stuff. And I just thought that was so weird. And I'm like, it just seemed really off to me. Like they just made it seem like that's the most impossible thing ever. To a class of like 8-year-old, 10-year-old kids, even 10-year-old kids. You wouldn't think that because it's so close to 13. But when we're 10 years old, you still have a lot of that like childish part of you where it's like you think about the impossible things a lot, and it was weird to me. I was like, all these kids are laughing. It just made me think like these kids are a bunch of dicks because they're like suddenly just insanely grown up for young kids. I just thought that was so weird in the beginning. They all laughed like crazy at them. Like they're all like 10-year-old kids. Like how are they? Like every kid in the class was just like so stuck, because of their parents. Like it's totally impossible to do this. Like these kids have zero imagination or something, and they just laughed. I was like, it just seemed weird. But I guess that was supposed to be like, that's Reed. That's how he is and stuff. So I don't know. I just thought that was weird. when that first happened, I'm like, that just doesn't make sense to me. They're like 8-year-old kids. They're just like totally impossible. He's crazy. Like they're 8 or 10 or something. So that bugged me when I first saw it. Like that just doesn't. It was too mature to me. Like if it was high school or something, I'd get that. I'd be like, yeah, they'd all laugh at him because he's like 14 years old, and he's like, I want to be the first person to teleport to another dimension or something. And it just seemed weird to me because it felt like they were way too young to be so judgmental because they're so young. It was weird. But anyway, all that, I felt could have been slightly condensed. None of it really came back. We never saw any of their family ever again. We saw Ben at home when Reed calls him up, like, hey, we're going to go to other, dimension, so I want you here with me. But that's it. We don't ever actually see their family. I figured something was going to happen where his older brother would still be there, and he'd have to, like, fight with his brother just to get to Reed. But that doesn't happen either. I was like, oh, they, like, don't show anything with their family. They didn't show anything with Reed getting accepted to the Baxter building and his parents being like proud of him and his dad saying like I know I was mad before but I'm happy now. Any of that stuff, it was like they showed their family and how their families kind of treated them, and then it's just like meh, that's it. I guess that was to kind of reinforce like they're the only people that each other has. Although Ben, clearly his mother cared a lot about him not getting beat up by his older brother, but I don't know, it's just a lot of stuff like that, like that whole chunk in the beginning felt like it just never really came back into the story. It was like, here's how they met, and I guess you don't really need it, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it stands out so much because, of course, with Sue and Johnny being brother and sister, their dad is like a main character in the movie, so maybe that's another reason why it's like, it's weird that they don't really have, they put a bit of a focus on it when they're really young, but after that it's like nothing whatsoever, their home life, even though we see Ben, at home, he just leaves in the middle of the night, nothing happens. I was just like, huh, he just made it, and that was it. He got there, and then they go off to the planet. But I don't know, just a lot of, it was just a kind of wasted chunk. I felt in the beginning, a lot of stuff, no callbacks or anything like that, and just all the talky stuff. No real use of powers until the very end of the movie. The fact that they still had to train to get better, like Sue and Reed didn't have complete control until the very end of the movie, finally after a full year. And Reed's just like a glob of clay on the ground and like everybody's losing and he's like, oh, I gotta finally know how to do this after a freaking year, which, like I said, I don't know, maybe he was practicing and it didn't work because, excuse me, the scene when he was running out, and he had nothing but pants on, clearly his arms would have just been flopping, but he had that much control, and it seemed like his body retracted on its own anyway, because the first scene when he stretches, and he passes out, they have him stretched out, and basically when he gets out of those little wraps, he has that control right there, but it was just weird. It was like he showed control early on in the movie, and then when it comes to the fight scene, it's like, oh no, I'm useless now. I'm like no bones or whatever. So it was like it went back and forth. It was really weird. And then he has like perfect facial reconstruction power. Like I'm gonna change my face and look totally different, but I can't. I'm totally taken down when my suit breaks because I still can't figure out how to stretch my arm out and back, but I can totally change my face. So it's like weird stuff like that. It's like it's so back and forth with how much control he does have and how little control he has. So it was just, that was another random annoying thing. All the dialogue, of course, just a lot of talky. Like I said, Batman v Superman style, just much shorter. So that's the only reason it's better. Plus, jokes like that was honestly the only thing that got me through the whole movie, is that I actually laughed at some stuff, and some stuff I did actually enjoy some of the dialogue, like the thing with knowing the people that landed on the moon but not knowing the people that made the shuttle, that allowed them to land on the moon. So there's bits of dialogue here and there, and definitely should have been a TV show, like right after that first fight scene when it's just Ben and Reed, and Ben's like, look at me, and he's like, I'm not your friend anymore. I'm like, boom, cut right there. That's the first episode. That's how it should have been. But not, just not the greatest movie. It definitely had potential. There's every time it was just like, man, this seems like it'll lead to something really cool. But instead, they kept the whole movie condensed to this little secret facility, and the little moment when Reed was out, right before they captured him, And that was the whole thing. It was this other planet. We saw. I feel like we saw more of the other planet than we did of our own planet. A little bit in this film. I felt like we did, and it was just crazy. Like that's just kind of how the whole movie went. But I don't know. It would be interesting to see if they take these characters and put them into Fox's sort of Fox's Marvel Cinematic Universe with X-Men and Deadpool, because they are the same universe. And I think as minor characters, or maybe with less direction from Fox itself, as the director said, like I had a totally different version that was actually great. Maybe we could have fun with that, But clearly, Fox won't do it. As everyone says, give the rights back to Marvel, or maybe don't have so much insane input to make it a crappy movie. But we'll see where it goes. But I would love to know if you guys saw this movie. What was the best thing about it? I would love to know what you thought was the best thing and the worst thing about this movie. Number one thing, just bottom of the list piece of crap part of the entire movie. For me, like I said, Doom just walking down the hall blowing people's brains out, favorite part of the whole movie. Um, Least favorite thing, it would be probably the fact that there wasn't any action. Like like I said with Batman v Superman, it at least had a lot of action towards the end of the movie. There were quite a few fight scenes, even though some of them, specifically one of the kind of action scene that did happen but didn't happen. I don't want to spoil it, even though you just shouldn't see it anyway until it's free. But that scene, that was like the only one that bothered me. But it just didn't have like any action. It's a superhero movie. It doesn't have to be like action fest 24/7, but have action in it at least, and don't have one like 10-minute fight scene, and then the first fight scene period is seriously like a minute long. If it was, it may have been like 2 minutes or something. I may have just condensed it just thinking about it, but it definitely wasn't more than. It couldn't have been more than even 3 minutes long. But I would love to know what you thought was the very best part of this movie. And I would love to know if you did see this and Batman v Superman, which would you prefer to see? Like I said, I believe I mentioned it here as well, but prefer to see this solely because it's shorter, and that's really it. But I would love to know your thoughts, so please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.